All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're doing a deep dive into what one source is calling the real BRICS financial strategy for 2026. While everyone's been talking about a new currency to take on the US dollar, it looks like a much quieter, more subtle plan is already well underway. So let's break down what's really going on here.
Okay, so first things first, let's tackle the rumor that everyone's heard about, right? The idea that the BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are about to launch some brand new unified currency backed by a pile of gold, all designed to knock the dollar off its throne. But here's where it gets really interesting. The source we're examining today says forget all that. That whole idea is just a distraction, a smokescreen. According to their analysis, a unified BRICS currency is totally off the table. The real plan is something way more practical, way more strategic, and honestly, maybe even more disruptive to the current financial system.
So if it's not some new super currency, then what is the plan? Well, the source argues it's a much more methodical pivot away from the dollar. It's a strategy that's all about trade, building real things, and backing a currency with actual productivity, not just financial speculation.
And this quote right here, which our source highlights, really gets to the core of the whole strategy. China's confidence isn't coming from Wall Street traders. It's coming from its absolutely massive industrial power. They're essentially saying, our money is strong because we make things.
And this sets up a huge showdown. We're not just talking about one currency versus another anymore. This is a clash of two totally different philosophies about what actually gives money its value in the 21st century.
The source basically lays out these two competing models. On one side, you've got the US model. Its power comes from global finance, from Wall Street, a system that has grown way bigger than the actual economy of making and selling stuff. But on the other side, you've got China's model, which is completely rooted in its role as the world's factory. The belief there is that a currency has to be tied to real-world economic activity.
And the numbers here are just staggering. Seriously, take a look at this. The source material shows that today, China's industrial output is bigger than the United States, the European Union, and Japan combined. That's a complete flip of the global manufacturing map in just a couple of decades.
Now let's flip the coin. In contrast to that manufacturing power, the source points to what it sees as a major vulnerability in the US model, a national debt that has just soared past $38 trillion.
But this next number, this is the one that really makes you stop and think. The source makes a huge point about currency creation. It cites this mind-blowing statistic. 80% of all US dollars in existence were reportedly printed in just a 22-month period. This is framed as a fundamental, philosophical difference in how you manage an economy.
Okay, so we've talked about the big ideas, the theory. But what does this actually look like in the real world? How does it work? Well, our source points to a case study in Kenya that shows exactly how this productivity-based strategy is already playing out.
So check this out. Kenya had billions in debt for a railway, and it was all in US dollars. That meant every single time the US Federal Reserve raised interest rates, Kenya's payments got more expensive. It was completely unpredictable. So they switched the debt to the Chinese yuan, or RMB, and look at the difference. The interest rate was cut by more than half, from a shaky 6.37% to a solid fixed 3%. That one move instantly saved them hundreds of millions of dollars. The effect was immediate. It was a total game changer. Suddenly, Kenya had stable financing they could actually plan around. They were no longer at the mercy of decisions being made thousands of miles away in the US. This switch let them break free from what the source calls the dollar trap, and it freed up a ton of money for more development.
And you've got to understand, this thing with Kenya, it's not a one-off. The source argues this is the playbook. It's a repeatable blueprint. This is the core of the BRICS 2026 model, right here in action. So let's break down exactly how this machine works.
And this is the absolutely crucial part. It's a self-reinforcing loop. It's pretty brilliant, actually. China loans money for a project, but it's in their own currency. Then they require Chinese companies to be hired to build it. Those companies then buy all their materials from, you guessed it, back in China. This creates decades-long ties, and finally, the country has to get and use Chinese currency to pay back the loan. It finances development, boosts China's own economy, and expands the global use of its currency, all in one go.
So when you step back and you put all these pieces together, the source concludes that this isn't really about loans or trade deals anymore. It's about methodically, piece by piece, building an entirely parallel financial system, one that just operates outside the traditional dollar-based world.
So this quiet, productivity-first strategy, That's what the source presents as the real BRICS 2026 plan. It's not a loud declaration of war on the dollar. It's a much more subtle, but maybe even more powerful reshaping of global finance. And that leaves all of us with a final, pretty provocative question. Is this the beginning of the biggest financial shift we're going to see in our lifetime?